Hi guys, here with a sample paragraph for you for the pairing of Tracks and Charlie's Country. So have a look at how we've constructed this paragraph, the sentence starters that have allowed for comparison, and some of the content that you'll be able to get out of here from today through some of the ideas or the comparisons that we bring up. Please make sure you ask lots of questions down there in the comments and that you clarify anything that you're a little bit confused about today, because the best comparative paragraphs come from the students that have been rehearsing them, that have been practicing the different ways of responding to questions and always making sure that they get to comparison. So please make sure that you ask lots of questions. We'd love to help you out. Let's jump in. Both texts examine the manner in which how one may perceive themselves being reliant upon those around them and the social expectations that are placed upon them. Although differing in circumstance, both Robin and Charlie must fight to find freedom and confidence in who they are, despite the actions of those who look to denigrate and disenfranchise them. So a really clear opening to this paragraph. It's clear what it's going to explore. It's clear that it's dealing with the similarities that exist between these texts and the shared idea of people that must fight against the decisions that have been made about them and the way that they are perceived by the more dominant parts of a culture. Notice some of the language that really allows this to work well, where we have things like although, a really simple word, but a great way of beginning sentences where we can say, although one thing might appear this way, of course we're going to go and off and resolve the sentence in another way. Differing in circumstance. So, when we take that out a bit further and we actually ask ourselves, although differing in circumstance, it can be a really great way to start any comparative sentence. That way of acknowledging right from the start, okay, the circumstances are different, however, it comes back here. You'll notice that in a lot of the comparative paragraphs that we write here on the English Lab YouTube channel, it's about the way of going in between texts, that way of saying, right, this is where they're different, this is where they're the same, this is where they go off in different directions, but they come back to share this similar idea. A language that can help you do that, a sentence starter such as the one that I've just pointed out. And it goes on to say, Dahir's audience are exposed to the plight of the Indigenous people within Charlie's community through the initial disconnect between older members such as Charlie and old Lulu and the younger members of the area. The need for the children to be taught the traditional ways is a source of despair for the elders, as they believe the children don't care anymore. Tellingly, their lack of cultural understanding is linked to them going to school now, a belief that formal education comes at the expense of the Indigenous children's understanding their own cultural heritage. So what I want to point out there is that it's always important for you to be comparative. Now, I know that sounds like the most basic thing to say to students that are studying, reading and comparing, but you'd be surprised how many essays provide lots of evidence for either of the texts, show how much they know, but never allow themselves to actually get to comparison. And what I want to point out there is that even though we should always be looking to compare, of course we need to have things to compare. So we need to actually be bringing up evidence. And if we take a look through all of those, 3 sentences, I think it was, that I just read, and say we were to colour them red, for example, the reason we'd colour them red is because they're all related to Charlie's Country. There's no mention of tracks or anything like that. And so this is something that you can do with your work to see whether you're relying on one text too much. Now, it's not maths. You don't have to have exactly 50% of either text, in each paragraph. But it is important to see, well, how much evidence am I talking about and how much am I actually dedicating towards comparing these as a pair, as opposed to just talking about them as 2 separate texts. Let's take a look at where it goes to. Notice that this next sentence just begins directly with Robin. We don't need to reintroduce the text every time we switch between them. It becomes cumbersome. It really takes away from the sophistication of an essay. So when we take a look at that, we can see that it jumps straight into it. Robin is similarly limited. Okay, so we actually do have some comparison happening here. We actually do have this word similarly. Now, similarly, of course, is going to be a great word for you to use if you're looking to, talk about similarities and compare these texts, but you don't want to have that as the only thing that you use in your paragraph writing. You don't want to be saying, yeah, look, I compared because I used the word similarly once. Essentially, all that's saying is that, the texts do have something in common where they talk about, what is similar between them. And so it reads, Robin is similarly limited by the sexist and misogynistic beliefs of those around her. So I'd call that a sentence of comparison. I would say that the fact that it is, yes, of course it's talking about Trax and Robin, but it is saying so in a way where it is, what is said in that sentence has been informed by what was said before. We've talked about the limitations placed upon the Indigenous people in Charlie's community, but that similar idea exists in that Robin is similarly limited. So therefore it's not just, okay, I was talking about Charlie's country, now I'm talking about Trax. It's this way of saying, well, okay, everything that I've said about Charlie's country has informed what I'm now saying about Trax, in that they share this similar idea. Let's see how it goes from there. Such attitudes are portrayed as the prevailing belief of a male-dominated culture which sees little girls as more fragile, more delicate. Both De Heer and Davidson exhibit the immense power of a society and those who hold power within it. Now, what's really interesting about this is that if we were to say to colour the sections of Trax, with the colour blue and Charlie's country in red, we'd have to label this purple because it's talking about De Heer and Davidson, and it's talking about them in the exact same sentence. So therefore, it's a really clear, direct statement that is comparing the text as a pairing. De Heer and Davidson, talking about them together, not going to talk about one text, then I'm going to talk about another, and hopefully wrap it up at the end. Whilst Robin must deal with awful labels such as the town's next rape case, Charlie is told by law enforcement that blackfellas are smart when they want to be. So the word whilst is a fantastic word for us to be using, because if we're using it correctly, it means that if we begin the sentence with whilst, we must resolve that sentence by looking at the other side of the coin, a different way of seeing this thing. And so we begin that sentence with whilst. I'd call that another purple sentence because the original idea there is that it's about Robin and that awful quote, the next rape case, and then Charlie with the, blackfellas are smart when they want to be. So we have the fact that both of these pieces of evidence can be put together in the same sentence to illustrate an overarching idea that exists between the two texts. The attitudes of those around them have pigeonholed the protagonists and revelled in the lack of power and agency afforded to them. Again, speaking broadly about both texts. Both Robin and Charlie find themselves needing to escape the limitations imposed upon them. Robin through her journey and Charlie through his return to the mother country to live the old way. However, and so everything that's been written up until this point has been, comparative and talking about the texts together, but really hasn't got to any deep comparison. Rather, it's just been saying that the characters, Robin and Charlie, go through similar experiences, even though the circumstances are different. This is where this paragraph begins to really hit its stride, because it begins this next sentence with however. You'll notice that a lot of the vocabulary that I'm pointing out today is not that extraordinary. It's not, some 14-syllable word that no one's ever heard of. It's simple, direct, clear language like however, although, whereas, whilst. These are our best friends when it comes to writing clear, comparative paragraphs like this one. However, whilst both find some success in their escape, it is clear that these moments of freedom are fleeting and that both texts expose the tremendous power of societal expectations and its impact upon an individual. Despite their best efforts, both Charlie and Robin must return to a setting that aims to label and dismiss them, leading them to feel responsible for their own lack of power and agency. And so that's the end of the paragraph. I hope that you've got a lot out of it. I hope that whether it is a vocabulary term, a word that you hadn't used before, a sentence structure, a way of thinking about the text, anything that you might have seen today, I hope that it's helped you out. We love making these types of videos, so please jump down in the comments and ask us lots of questions. Let us know what else you'd like to see on the channel. There are argument analysis videos, Section A texts, and other videos are related to Trax and Charlie's country. So make sure you subscribe to the channel and jump onto those. Until we see you next time, all the best with your studies and good luck.